Woodruff, New York Times bestselling author of Seed of the Soul, and several other transformational works, including 2 books co-authored with his spiritual partner, Linda Francis. Together, they help people across the world in creating meaning and purpose, creativity and health, joy and love. They call this authentic power, the alignment of the personality with the soul. And today we'll be talking about the most dangerous virus. Welcome, Gary and Linda.
Well, thank you, Shannon. It's really good to be here with you and everyone.
Today and every day for the last several weeks, people have been talking about the virus. And the virus they're talking about is a physical virus. The virus that Linda and I are going to be talking about and offer for your consideration is one that is actually much more dangerous. It's an older virus. It's a well-established virus. It's so commonplace that most people don't even know that they're carrying it. But it's contagious, and they can pass it on. And when they do pass it on, the person they pass it on to often doesn't even notice it because that person's got the virus too. In other words, everyone has this virus. It's that widespread.
Indeed, and I do want to say one thing before we go any further. We always say, and it's that whatever you hear today from us, we don't expect you to believe anything that you hear, but we want you to take it into consideration if you would like to, and experiment with what we say. In fact, we say not to believe anything that anyone says or anyone writes or anything that you hear, but to test it out for yourself, to try it out. So that's where we come from. So the things you hear today may be different than the way you think about them, and it may be totally in resonance or alignment with you, and you may know that. So we're just asking you to, if you would like, to experiment with what we have to say and see what happens.
Okay, 1 second. I'm hearing that our screen is frozen and we have no sound. We just tested, so 1 second, I'm checking this. I want to make sure everybody can hear this wonderful message. Let's see. So we are hearing each other. Okay, 1 second. I'm hearing that our screen is frozen. Okay, I think, yes. I think we're back. Okay. Thank you for the comments, those of you who alerted us. Yes, okay, we're good. So as always, yes, take what resonates with you and discard what doesn't. And hopefully these messages from Gary and Linda resonate. Perfect.
I don't know exactly who heard and what you heard, but we'll just go on from here. And I just want to say something. I see someone that we know, and I really appreciate seeing his name on the screen, and a lot of you coming up on the screen. So it's really great to be with you.
This person we just saw is Tom Zuba, who's written some wonderful books on grief and giving yourself permission to grieve. We met on one of the first Oprah Winfrey shows that I did.
Indeed.
It's great to see you here, Tom. It's great to see all of you here.
And Gary has been featured on Oprah Winfrey over 35 times. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Some of those I wasn't the feature. Some of those I was giving a shorter thought about something. But yes, essentially that's correct. Oprah and I have done some wonderful things together. I'm very happy about that. And I welcome everyone here who might have seen Oprah and me together. It's great to be talking to you again.
Indeed.
So this virus that we're talking about is really quite important to everybody because everybody has it, and that's why very few people notice it. So let me give you some of the symptoms of this virus. There's so many. For example, have you ever been angry? Well, have you ever been angry and aware that you're angry? Sometimes you can be angry and not be aware of it. Have you ever been jealous? Have you ever felt superior and entitled?
Have you ever felt inferior? Feel like you don't belong in the company of the people that you're with because you're just not worthy of being in their company?
And so you're needing to please other people. Have you ever felt Depressed
Or how about overwhelmed
or manic.
or stressed out?
Have you ever had an obsession? Now, these come in different varieties. Here's a common one: romantic love. You can't get your mind off someone. Or winning. Maybe you need to compete. You need to win the gold. You need to be a millionaire before you're 32 or 22. Or maybe you're upset. Well, an obsession means a thought that you just won't leave your head. And that also is a sign of this virus. Have you ever had a compulsion like workaholism or
shopping,
perfectionism?
maybe shopping.
Shopping, let's call that an addiction.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever had any addiction like to gambling or sex or pornography or drugs or alcohol? All of those are examples of manifestations of this virus. So you can see we're talking about a virus that is widespread. It's spread throughout the entire human species because these are emotions that every human has experienced, everyone without exception. But they haven't been able to say, that's a virus. Well, it's actually not a virus except in the metaphorical sense, and that's how we're using it. Metaphorically, that's a virus because when you're competitive, that's contagious. People around you get competitive or they back off. When you're angry, people usually back away or they come out to confront you. So this virus we can give a name to. It's a generic name, and we're going to call it fear.
Mm-hmm. So is there a vaccination for this virus?
There is not.
What is the remedy? Or how do we live with this virus that's so widespread?
Well, there is a remedy. How do we live with it? Most people are experiencing that now. How do you live with your anger, your jealousy, your resentment? So instead of saying your jealousy, your resentment, your anger, let's look at it more close up. Let's say that this experience, in this case, we'll take anger because I know about that. I grew up very angry. That doesn't come from you, from the unchangeable ground of your being. It comes from a part of your personality, an aspect of your personality. So it is jealousy. So it is superiority and inferiority and all of the things that Linda and I just named. All of those put together, we can say belong in the same basket. That's fear. And all of these experiences have a couple of things in common. Number one, they're really unpleasant to experience. And in fact, they hurt. Have you ever really looked inside you at what you feel when you're jealous? Oh, that is painful. That's excruciating, almost unbearable. How about when you're angry, or when you're resentful, or when you're frightened about paying the rent, or when something that you really need might disappear from your life? For example, someone that you think you can't live without, that you're going to love for eternity, says, I don't love you anymore. How about if a child gets ill? All of these are excruciatingly painful experiences, and fear has that in common. All of the experiences of fear hurt to experience them.
Physically hurt.
Physically hurt.
That's physical
Like hitting your thumb with a hammer or getting it caught in a car door. And in fact, it can hurt even more than that. Now, there's another aspect of this basket. Whenever you act on anything in this basket, you create consequences. And those consequences are painful to encounter. I mentioned a couple of them already. When you're angry, you push people away. They won't be vulnerable or intimate around you. And you don't have any close friends, people that are close to your heart. So all of this is the virus. And as far as living with it goes, most of us are living with it because we do these things these parts of our personalities get activated and we act on them. We become angry and we speak angrily. Is there a remedy? Yes, there is a remedy at last. The remedy is as old as the virus, but it's only until recently that people have begun to realize how effective and powerful this remedy is. The remedy is love.
Of course it is.
And not only that, there is no other remedy. Now, here, some people might say, oh, no. All I have to do is make that $1 million before I'm 28 or 32 or 54. All I have to do is get this trophy wife or trophy husband. All I need is a beautiful home with picket fences or 3 mansions and a yacht. That's the remedy for fear.
But of course, when they get those things, they realize that that isn't the remedy. But they don't know that as they're pursuing them.
What they realize is that before they, yes, Linda's exactly right, but put in this way, they were frightened before they acquired these things. Their fear was that they would not acquire them. And once they get them, that fear is replaced with the fear that they're going to lose them.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, Shannon, I just want to say again that I don't know if people heard this because our screen was frozen. And so I just want to make sure that before we talk to anyone at the beginning of an event or anything, we always let people know that don't believe what we say, try it out. You can see if it fits for you. If it's something that doesn't even make sense to you and you don't think it's important, then let it go. But if there's anything that we say that seems resonant with you or you think might be helpful to you, try it out. We also say, be sure that you don't believe anything anyone says. That's what we recommend, that you really are aware that just because someone writes a book, has a bestseller, is on TV, it doesn't matter what they're saying. It's you are the one that's the authority. You can become the authority in your own life and decide if that's true for you and if that's something that supports you.
Thank you for sharing that with our audience.
Yeah.
So I'd love to bring this conversation, now that we've defined fear and this virus that's transmittable and the cure, to what's happening now globally. The virus of fear is spreading at an unprecedented rate and permeating every aspect of our daily lives. Can you share some insight on that?
Yes. If everybody, I feel, or most people, when the virus was first announced, discovered, and precautions began to be taken against it, we had this interesting period of time in which fear of the virus was spreading much more rapidly than the virus. That's still happening, by the way. So the virus of fear spreads faster than the coronavirus. It lasts longer. It's devastating. And there's no vaccine. That's the only thing it has in common so far with the coronavirus. The coronavirus is simply a physical dysfunction. It's a physical dysfunction that should be respected because it's a good thing to keep your body, which some people call a temple and some people call, well, temple's a good word. A temple for what? A temple for who you really are. You are more than a mind and a body. You are also a presence that existed before you were born and that will continue to exist after you die. Let's call that a soul. That's because most Christians do, and most Hindus also do. And it's a good word because everyone understands it is a part of you. That's really you, and it doesn't die. Even Christians understand that it doesn't die because that's where the concept of heaven and hell come from. You do things in this lifetime that create consequences that you experience after you die. That means your awareness doesn't stop when you die. Buddhists know this also. Hindus know this also. And more than that, whether you're Buddhist or Hindu or Christian,
or whatever religion you are.
Or whatever religion. Thank you, beloved. You begin, hundreds of millions of us are beginning to experience just that. This awareness that I'm more. I'm more than a body. I'm more than a mind. I'm more than muscles and molecules. I know I am. That's the beginning of a new consciousness in you. The new consciousness is something that has emerged in the last 30 years, and it's beginning to touch hundreds of millions of people, as I mentioned. Not only neonates who are born with an expanded perception, but people like us who were always confined to the old consciousness, and now we're not. What does that mean? Well, the old consciousness means being confined to the perceptions of the five senses, where we could see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. And we thought, that's the world. That's the universe, galaxies without end. Now we are acquiring an expanded perception that is not limited to the five senses. So let's call that multisensory perception, because the five senses together form a single sensory system whose object of detection is physical reality. Your soul is not detectable in physical reality, but you can sense it, and a lot of people are. Now, beloved, if you have anything that you'd like to add, would you please do that?
Well, you know, I was wondering, Shannon, I know you had some questions you wanted to ask us, and I would just love to hear, maybe there are things that people are asking and you want to ask us.
Right. So, thank you, Gary, for bringing awareness of the different levels of, the soul and the five senses, our body, what's happening here, if we're experiencing fear with our five senses here, and maybe how we can draw up into that higher awareness or greater awareness, and maybe a way that we can travel back and forth so that we're not so inundated. And how do we maintain equilibrium, basically, with what's happening?
I understand your question, but can we look at it from a different perspective?
Please. Yes.
Instead of trying to find equilibrium or draw up into a higher consciousness, let's say that the higher consciousness is here, and it's in hundreds of millions of people. And within a few generations, for example, by the time our granddaughters have granddaughters, everyone will have this expanded perception. And it won't be something that people will doubt, because it'll be a common experience. It'll be the human experience. So, but what do we do now? Now is when we've got the coronavirus. Now is when we're becoming jealous and angry and resentful and manic and depressed and addicted and compulsed. What do we do now? Well, since we know the remedy for this virus of fear is love, the question becomes, where can I get some? Because I need some now.
Well, I'd take a stab at that by saying you give it to get it.
That is a great start.
That's a good one.
That is a great start.
Yeah.
So the next question becomes, how do you give it when you're angry? How do you give it when you're jealous? In other words, when this virus of fear, which is, you might say, sometimes is dormant, which only means not that it's not active, but it is not in your awareness. But when it is in your awareness, then you say, well, how do I give love when I don't like this person? How do I give love to someone I don't like? How do I give love to a Nazi? How do I give, they're all gone now, or are they? That's an energy in itself. How do I love them? Well, there's, again, a fail-safe way to do that. Find every aspect of your personality that prevents you from loving and move beyond the control of it. So what are those aspects that keep you from loving? Anyone out there take a guess? We're looking at your comments.
Yes, we can read the comments, and we'll be addressing questions towards the end of our time together. I would like to answer that question, though. How do you get some love? And how do you find the parts of your personality that are preventing you? And what are those parts? Those are the very same parts that we were talking about and are talking about. The parts that come from a fearful part of your personality. Anger, jealousy, resentment, all of those prevent you from loving. Fear, wanting something and afraid you're not going to get it.
Right.
Frightened of losing your fortune, your wife, your husband, your children, your house, your skis, all of that.
How about afraid of getting the coronavirus?
fear of getting
I think
the
that's a
coronavirus.
really, strong fear that's happening right now.
Mm.
Or afraid because they laid you off of your job today.
Mhm.
They laid half of the company off. Afraid because something is happening. In fact, you're home, and all the time that you used to spend at work or keeping yourself distracted is no longer there, and you don't know what to do. Those are the kinds of things that are going to bring up the fears that you're not even aware of in you.
Right.
And so what Gary's talking about is exactly what to do when those fears come up, whatever the fear is. And now we're having this opportunity, if we use it as an opportunity, to go deeper into looking at what it is in us that's creating fear and in us. Because if I don't change that in me, I can't create with love, because then the fear in me will take over. I remember like last week, when we came back from an event that we gave, it was probably the last time we could have given an event, because it happened like about 2 weeks ago. And it was so interesting because some people were really worried about the virus, so they didn't come to the event. So we did something novel and completely different than we've ever done.
For us, yeah.
For us. I said to our team, how can we have people that don't feel comfortable about coming together be with us online? How could we do that? I'd really like to create something like that if we could do that. In one day, they created this amazing experience to have people physically together. We were together like we were going to be, but there were people that couldn't come to the event, and they were with us the whole weekend, the whole 4 days. And it was an amazing experience. But if I had been fearful and thinking, oh my gosh, all these people aren't coming, what are we going to do? And oh, this is just should we cancel? Because it wasn't right to cancel it. I knew in my heart, we really listened to our intuition. We opened up and we said, no, it's supposed to happen now. This is supposed to happen. And people may not be able to come, but that's okay. We will offer them the opportunity. And we did. And it was amazing. It was amazing what happened. But then when I got home, I realized there were a lot of people in fear that were nearby. And not that they're not, everyone can be, there are a lot of people in fear. But what I noticed is that I started feeling some fear. And I started thinking about, oh, what if I get it? What if I'm not really careful, or whatever? And then I realized, oh my goodness, this is just a frightened part of my personality.
You got infected.
I did. I got infected by my own fear that was in me. And so I felt where it was in my body and just noticed it. I noticed the thoughts that I was having with that fear.
You've always been infected, as have I, but what you saw around here activated the virus in you in that moment.
It did.
And you became frightened.
I did.
Of a physical virus.
Yes, my frightened parts that were afraid came up. And so what I did is I looked at it and I went, oh, this is fear. So I began my process of how can I change that in me, because I'm not going to act on this. I'm not going to continue walking around and calling people and saying, oh my God, what's happening? I'm not going to do that. So what I did is I just started sending loving energy to people who were actually experiencing the virus, sending loving energy to a friend of ours that had just had a major stroke, and she was told she couldn't have any more visitors. We were the last visitors she got to see. We were so, it was just like so amazing what's the opportunities for growing and learning right now. And when that virus, as Gary says, came up in me, I was infected by this virus. It's getting involved with, oh my gosh.
You were infected. We are infected by the virus, if you want to put it that way, at birth.
It's always there.
In other words, this is a part of five sensory perception. Five sensory perception is the old consciousness. It's the consciousness that's limited. Now we have a new consciousness. It's not better, and it doesn't make us superior to have it. It just means that consciousness is less limited. And when we use it, we are less limited in our perceptions. So we have fear. Everyone is frightened of not being. When you're in the old consciousness, it seems that your pain, your emotional pain, is caused by the outside world. And so when you're in emotional pain, You try to change the outside world to get out of that.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So if your business fails, you make another business. If your bike gets stolen, you get another bicycle. And that works until that bicycle gets stolen. So in other words, the best that you can do by trying to change the world to make yourself feel better is temporary happiness. That's not the joy that we're talking about. Love is joy, and it's not dependent on the outside world. But before we go further, I want to thank the Mentor Channel for sponsoring this conversation,
Yes.
because Linda and I want to do more than just say some things to make you feel better.
Mm.
First of all, we don't have that power to make you feel better. You're the only one that can make you feel better. But we can say some things that you might find helpful in moving beyond the control of fear. And moving beyond the control of fear is creating real power. That's authentic power. There was a comment just a few moments ago that said, how do I send love to Trump? With 3 or 4 exclamation marks.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Well, first of all, some people already have an affection for this man. But if you don't, find someone that you really don't have an affection for. And the way to send love to that person is the same as the way to send love to any person, especially a person you don't like, especially a person you've judged, especially a person who is less than you want that person to be. In other words, you want to change the world. You want to change that person to make you feel safe and valuable. In other words, you want to pursue external power. That power is now toxic to our evolution. And that's why I'm grateful that the Mentor Channel is having this conversation, because this is a conversation of significance. When we say the coronavirus activates fear, why would it? You're just going to get a cough and a fever and make it hard to breathe, and you're going to be miserable if you get it, or really miserable, and some of us are going to die. But not all of us are going to die. This is not the bubonic plague. But we still have this fear of it, a deep fear. Is it just fear of getting a fever and a cough and not being able to breathe for a week? Well, partially breathe for a week. No, it's the fear of death. It's that one little piece of the coronavirus that makes it terrifying, because it reminds us that while we are in the control of fear, the real virus, we're terrified of death. We don't understand it. We don't know what happens. We do everything we can to avoid it. It's the most devastating catastrophe imaginable.
To that frightened part of your personality.
To any 5-sensory human.
Oh, that's
Every 5-sensory human. And yet, at the same time, everyone knows they're going to die, but it hasn't registered yet.
Mm-hmm.
So when it does register, what's going to be your last thought? Oh, no. Or terror. Maybe that's going to be your last thought. What was Gandhi's last thought after 3 bullets tore through his body? Well, we don't know really what his last thought was, but we know what his last words were. God. Ram.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Hindu wisdom that if God, or Ram in Sanskrit, is in your mind, is in your heart, at the moment that you die, then something wonderful, really wonderful happens. You start, in some cultures it's called enlightenment, but you don't return to a world of limitation, of duality in time and space and matter. So, what are you going to do when you die? You don't know yet, and if you don't know, you're probably going to be frightened as well as surprised. But if you can move beyond the control of the real virus of fear now, and practice doing that day by day, every time you get angry or jealous or disappointed or overwhelmed, then you're going to develop a really remarkable habit of having the divine in your awareness moment by moment. That's creating authentic power. And I want to answer that question about how do you send love to someone you dislike. You create authentic power. And so the rest of our talk together can involve how you do that. Because first of all, you can learn how to do it by reading the book that Shannon showed at the beginning of this live broadcast of The Seat of the Soul. That will explain it pretty well, but it won't give you the experience of it. To get the experience of it, you've actually got to do it. You know, I went to a chiropractor once and he gave me an exercise. And when I came back the next time, he asked me, how's that joint now? And I said, oh, it's about the same. And I said, did you do the exercise? He said, did you do the exercise? And I said, no. And when I came back the second time and he asked the same question, and I said, no, I haven't done the exercise. He just looked at me and said, it works better if you do it.
Well, I'd love to ask Linda on this one too, because she talked about feeling that fear in her body. And, I think we're all going through cycles of that right now as we're dealing with the day-to-day of what's happening in the latest news. What are some practical tips you can share for when we're feeling that fear in our body and self-correcting and choosing, I'm not going to choose to engage with this, and how can I transmute it into love? Do you have some helpful hints for us?
Well, I can say a few things about that because there's no formula for how to do that, but it's mostly becoming aware of what you're feeling and noticing your thoughts. And if those thoughts are coming from fear, and if you're having painful sensations in your energy centers, your chakras, you know that fear is present. And if you act on that fear, you'll create consequences of doing things being controlled by fear. And so for me, that's my practice every day is to be aware of what's going on in my body, notice my thoughts. And when I have thoughts that come from fear and when I have sensations that are painful in my body, what I do every day is to challenge those fears, meaning I'm not going to act on them. Now, sometimes I find that I have acted on them. So then as soon as I see that, I stop that and start again. And and without making myself wrong, because then that's another frightened part that comes in to make me wrong and make me feel embarrassed or ashamed or whatever. You can also challenge that. And so I never know exactly what I'm going to do to create with love, but I follow my intuition, I follow my heart. And I do something. Usually it has to do with supporting someone or calling someone or doing something loving for myself or starting over. Let's say I'm in a power struggle with Gary and I notice that because I'm in a power struggle because my frightened part thinks it's right. So just in that case, then what I do is I feel what's going on and I do my best to notice what the intention of that part is in me. Is it loving or is it fearful? And if it's fearful, then I'll come over to him and I'll say, can we start again? Can we start this again? Can we start completely over and in love? And that usually shifts it immediately.
In fact,
because we're spiritual partners.
Right. I'm sorry, beloved. I was looking at a comment. Manfred Exley has said, when we feel fear, we can choose not to act on it and instead reach for the most loving part of ourselves we can find.
Absolutely.
And act from love instead of fear.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bamford. Great to hear you. Great to see you on the.
That is the process of creating authentic
That's exactly
power.
what we teach.
When you can do that while you're feeling the frightened part of your personality, while you're angry, while you're jealous, in that moment, reach for the healthiest part of your personality you can and act from that part. So what are the healthiest parts? We know the basket that's got all the frightened parts. What about the basket that has, call it the loving parts, the parts that originate in fear? These are experiences like gratitude, appreciation, caring, patience, all of the universe. So when you're overwhelmed, reach for one of these. Sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, I can't even remember what one of them is. But if I stay with it, or I look at my cheat sheet, gratitude, I think, what can I be grateful for? And I think, I can be grateful that I'm alive. I can be grateful that I have authentic power to share with people. I can be grateful for my beloved, Linda Francis. I can be grateful for this show. I can be grateful for you who are watching.
Right.
I can be grateful to be sharing things that are significant and hearing them from you. And that is the way to challenge the anger that I was feeling in the moment. And when I do that, or when you do that, you challenge, put it that way, you challenge that frightened part of your personality. You decide not to act on it, even while it's demanding that you act on it. And it hurts when you don't act on it. You, in that moment, are challenging it. And as you do that again and again and again, you begin to move beyond the control of that part of your personality. It still comes. You still see its thoughts. You still feel its painful physical sensations, but they don't penetrate you the way they did. And instead, you act from love the best you can. And when I was angry a lot, I would, and I got angry, I'd say anything I felt like saying because I felt entitled to say it. And when I realized what I was doing and I didn't want to do that anymore, I set the intent not to do that. And at first, the best I could do was just to stand with my jaw clenched and my fist clenched and determined not to speak in anger, no matter what. And I began to draw different people to me. Before, I was drawing people to me who got angry and acted on their anger and get out of the way if you don't want it. Now I was beginning to draw people who get angry and were determined not under any circumstances to act on that anger. This is a wonderful law, that it's a universal law that it's nice for you to know about. We'll call it the law of attraction. It has nothing to do with getting Ferraris and Mercedes or things like that. It is attracting like energy. Whatever your energy is, you're going to attract people with the same or similar energy. Now, I can become angry and even at the same time listen to the person while I'm feeling this inside of me. And I've begun to realize something. I used to think that there were people that were far beyond my capability. People like Zen masters or people like enlightened individuals. And I thought that those people don't experience any of the things that I do. They're in another class of human. Well, maybe some of them are. I won't say that. But I will say that I know for sure they probably, or some of them at least, experience all the things that I do, even more acutely and painfully than I do. But they have more ability to choose responsibly, not to act on what they're feeling. And they have moved beyond the control of those painful parts. That is making a responsible choice, a choice for which you're willing to assume responsibility for what you create.
Yeah.
And that is the second part of creating authentic power. Emotional awareness and responsible choice.
And during this time of intensity of feeling frightened parts, feeling painful, frightened parts that come up, that are afraid to get the virus, that are afraid of losing a job, all the things that come up, that are coming up that are different than usual, normal, everyday life. It's heightened, our noticing of fear. It's very palpable and it's always there, but now it's heightened and coming up in different ways. But we can use that. So really our message is you can use that as an opportunity to grow, to learn about yourself, to really focus on how you can create with love more and more often, rather than going down the path of fear. Because that is, if you go down the path of fear, then it leads to depression and anger, and judgment, and the whole thing. And you don't, and I think the most important thing, and one of the things that I learned when I read The Seed of the Soul a long time ago, in 1989, before I met Gary, was there were a few things there. One of them was, I have a choice. I can choose. I don't have to act the way that I used to act. I don't have to be, when I feel jealousy, it's not about anyone else. It's about something inside of me, and I can change that in me by not acting from that part of me. I can't stop it from coming up. I feel it, when it comes up. And I'd say that particular fear was very strong in me. And I worked on it all the time when it would come up, and I would feel it in my body. It was very painful, but instead of thinking it had to do with the outside world or anyone else outside of me, I realized, no, it had to do with something I needed to learn about myself. And so as I learned about myself, oh my goodness, it became, at first it was really strong, and it would come up even stronger than when I didn't challenge it. Before, it would come up whenever it came up, but then when I said, no, I don't want to do this anymore, then it started coming up really strong all the time. But I knew I was committed to not letting it control me. And so with that commitment, I just kept, every time I would see it, I would notice it, feel it, and not act from it. And it became, so now, I mean, years later now, it's like every once in a while I'll kind of notice it, and it's like, oh, there you are. And I can laugh because it's I know that it's not real. That's not real. That's something that I thought was real, but it isn't. And it was really such a powerful thing for me. And so I know that we have this opportunity now to really look and examine ourselves. Maybe we have time to really notice while we're in our house and we can't go out, or can't really congregate with anyone that we're used to congregating with. It doesn't mean, what it means is we can really look at ourselves clearly. And we can also begin to see that if I create with fear, I'm just creating more and more fear, and it doesn't help, doesn't support what we need to do in the world right now. So how about if I send love to people? How about if I call people and are uplift, saying something really supportive rather than talking about, oh my gosh, look what's happening here.
Or,
We don't have to do
I'm
it
so
that
sorry,
way.
or something like that.
Or whatever, right?
I want to say, beloved, while this is on the screen for us,
Yes.
I want to say to Maddie has just said that something has helped her so much while her dad is fighting for his life from this virus.
Yes.
We have a friend who's doing the same, Maddie.
Yes.
So what we're talking about is not just a feel better, new age kind of approach.
No.
It is an approach that allows you to be effective in the world. And I think from your comment, which is gone now, but I really appreciate your making it, that I know that I can't help our friend, and Linda knows it, by becoming consumed in fear. She's important to us, but we want to send her love, not fear. And we want to celebrate her life, not fear for it. And this is the fear that everyone has. It's fear of dying. And as we become multisensory, we begin to look even at this in a different way.
Oh.
We had a friend once that ask a channel. I don't usually paraphrase channels, but our friend asked the channel, tell me about death. And the spirit that was being channeled said, it's entirely safe. That is not a way.
Can you repeat that? I think we lost a little bit. We've got some low, our resolution has dropped a little bit. So I want to make sure everyone's getting what you're saying, because this is very impactful.
Yes. The channel said to the question, tell me about death. The channel said, it's entirely safe. Now, this is a multi-sensory perspective. Death is terrifying and devastating to five-sensory perception. And even when you're multi-sensory, there's still the emotional reaction. That is the virus of fear. And all of these things are what we're looking at now in the most healthy ways that we can. And we have some healthy ways to look at them that we didn't have 30 years ago. We know there's a new consciousness that's entering the human species. Yes. We know that it brings with it new potentials and new understanding. We know that it reshapes the understanding of power, from ability to manipulate and control, to the alignment of your personality with your soul. We know that pursuing external power is toxic now, or I'd like to share that thought. Trying to change the world to make yourself feel better or safe now works against our evolution and produces consequences in your life that are painful to encounter. So all of these things have to do with what we're experiencing right now. We're talking about the virus. The virus is going to come. It's here, is going to go, we, most of us, are still going to have the most dangerous virus, and that's fear. What about those people who die because they have the virus? From the multisensory perception, that's not why people die. We saw a Sufi dramatization once, and someone brought a wounded person into a Sufi healer. And he said he's dying from loss of blood. And the Sufi healer said, no one dies from a loss of blood. They die because their time has come. Well, I don't mean to be flippant, but there's wisdom in that.
I think there is wisdom in that. And
I agree. That's why I shared it.
In fact, I think that when a soul, let's say that you don't have to believe anything we hear, but this is something that I'm really aware of in me. Everything changed when I read The Seed of a Soul in 1889. And one thing that I realized is that when the soul wants to go home, it goes home. That's what happens. And maybe that's the way some people will leave the earth school is through this virus. But I trust that it's happening exactly like it needs to. But I don't mean don't take precautions. I don't mean don't be aware of what you're doing. I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying that I trust that things happen the way that they need to for that particular person. And I could give you many stories about that. But one thing that I learned from The Seed of the Soul is that I don't feel fear of death. I don't feel that for myself or when I see it happening, because I know that there's no way anyone can be separate from me. No matter what, they're not separate.
Beloved, I want to draw attention, if I can, for a minute. Edward has just written, I do not fear death. I fear how I will die.
Oh.
Thank you, Edward. That's so well written.
Mm-hmm.
May I suggest that it's not you who fear how you will die. It's a frightened part of your personality that fears that.
Mm-hmm.
So that can help you as you come to terms with that. If you don't come to terms with it, you will fear that until you die. If you do come to terms with it, you'll find yourself liberated in ways that are really wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So fear is fear. Love is health. Fear is pain and emptiness. Love is fulfillment and vitality, meaning and joy. If you fear anything, don't suppress it. Don't repress it. Don't try to deny it. Use your emotional awareness, which means direct your attention to these areas on your body. There's seven of them. And look for physical sensations in those areas. And if you find painful physical sensations, not I'm happy, I feel light, I feel heavy, I feel bubbly, not that. Physical sensations means sensations that churn or burn or stab or ache or throb. When you find anything that's painful, you know that a frightened part of your personality has been activated. That aspect of the fear has been activated. That virus has become activated in you. And you can challenge it by reaching for a loving part of your personality and choosing it. And as you do, you move beyond the control of the frightened part of your personality. So it's not as though you transmute fear into love. Look at it this way. Michelangelo was a famous Italian sculptor. Many people have heard of him because he did so many beautiful sculptures, still the most beautiful in the world. And one of them was a sculpture called the David. And in that time, he sculpted the David. And it's so life-looking, it's so gorgeous, you can't believe, I couldn't believe it was made of marble. And someone asked him, how did you do that? And he said, he saw the David in the piece of stone. The David is 17 feet high, so it was a big piece of marble. And Michelangelo said he saw that beautiful figure in the marble. And what he did was remove the marble that kept the David hidden. Your love is like that. It's encased in stone. And by analogy, the stone is your fear. And as you create authentic power, chisel stroke by chisel stroke, chip by chip, you break the rock, the stone that's encasing your fear, your love, encasing your love.
Yeah.
And as you remove that, your love is what remains. And that's what happens every time you challenge a frightened part of your personality with your responsible choice, with your volition, by calling upon the energy of the most loving part of your personality that you can, while you want to kill someone, while you want to kill yourself, while you feel you're going to die because she's gone, while you don't want to live because he's gone, while you feel you've lost everything and life isn't worth living. That is the moment of spiritual traction, when you create authentic power. And as you do that again and again, you move beyond the control of that part. It's still in fear. It still thinks all of its thoughts, but you move beyond the control into it. And what happens then? You move more and more into love, into the loving parts of your personality. And their experiences, like gratitude and appreciation and caring and patience, start to move more and more into your consciousness. And you become more and more like them. That's creating authentic power. That is how you deal with the most dangerous virus, with fear. That's the only way to deal with it. If you find others, please let us know. And by the way, there's myriad ways of challenging fear. You can pray. You can walk by a stream. You can light a candle. You can chant.
Send loving thoughts to a friend.
You can go to meditation. Somebody suggested that. All of those things. It's the intention with which you do it. Intention is always fundamental. It is critical. It's why you do what you're doing. For example, someone wrote something beautiful, and I apologize, I've forgotten your name, but you talked about keeping social distance because you don't want to give the virus to someone else.
Yes.
That's love.
Yes.
If you keep a social distance because you don't want to get it from someone else, that's not love. And that's not social in the noble sense of the word. It's selfish. There's a difference between social distance and selfish distance. Social distance, the noble distance, the distance that you keep from love, that comes from others because you want to protect them. That comes from love. The distance when you keep it from others because you don't want to get what they have, that's self-serving. That's fear. There's no fulfillment. There's no joy. There's only more fear. So intention is everything. And as you look at your life, as you look at the coronavirus, as you look at the virus that really counts, as you look at your family and your friends who have the virus, as you look at those who may be mortally in danger because of the virus, will it help them? Will it help you if someone says, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or if someone says, "I'm celebrating her life with you also"? Well, that's what we do because that's what we do. We celebrate life, and that's what love does. So, Shannon,
Well,
time is almost here.
I'd like to ask if you I'd like to invite you to share a little bit on spiritual partnership in regards to so many spouses and family members are now finding themselves in close quarters. And there's the fear of the media on the outside of our home, but then also what's happening inside our home. And as we're now having these relationships that are much closer proximity than they typically are. Can you just share a little insight on how to really enhance our spiritual partnerships and use this time and to meet each other where we are in our own stories?
Well, first of all, people are being put in situations where they're with their family a lot more than they're used to being with their family. And so then the situation is, I can decide what I'm going to do with that time. Am I going to use it to learn about myself, or am I going to use it to be fearful and negative and judging? And so that's always the choice. And so for me, I'm always curious about what will happen. So let's say you have people, you're not used to being around your children that much, you're not used to, so you can decide to look at, okay, am I infected by the virus of fear right now? Am I reacting? Am I doing things that yelling or getting upset or wanting to isolate myself more, even in the house? And that's when you can decide, am I going to do that? Or am I going to feel what's going on in my body and say, this is fear, and I am going to create with love because I do not want to do that. And so doing it over and over again will be a wonderful spiritual practice while you're in isolation with your family. And it's all a matter of someone choosing to do that. Because right now I feel like we're all being asked to do that. We're being given this opportunity by the universe to learn more about ourselves, to be more loving, to stay connected with people. We don't have to be next to people to be connected, but we can become aware of our connection with people, and we can support them when they're in fear. We can support anyone in our family when they're feeling fearful. If we're not in fear, if we're not reacting, we can support them, and we can tell them they have a choice. Like maybe someone's grumbling about something, the kids are upset or something. You could say, well, you have a choice. You can stay doing this. You can go into your room and act like this, or you can come out and we can have a good time. It's always a choice. So I think children really need to know they have choices about what they can do.
That's actually the choice that you have.
Everyone has that choice.
It's identical. And by the way, Helene from Germany has just said something beautiful. She said, all of these things are exceptional because of now that we have the virus, I feel more gratitude, kindness, community, consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I hope it will translate into the way we do politics, the economy, save our planet. Do you think that this is the start of a new era after the lockdown is over? Yes, any moment is the start of the new era. Yeah. The new era started about 3 decades ago. That was the first appearance of the new consciousness, species-wide. There have always been people in our species that have the new consciousness. Our religions are named after them, so many of them.
People that are multisensory.
Mm-hmm. But this is the first time that an entire species, our species, has become multisensory at lightning speed. The old consciousness, 5-sensory perception, has evolved for millions of years. And now a new consciousness is appearing within a few generations. It's faster than an eye blink from an evolutionary perspective. But Helene, you're exactly right. The coronavirus, to the extent that it awakens in you your love, if it awakens in you opportunities to care for others, as it awakens your kindness and your consciousness, then yes, the new era is moving forward. It's moving forward. Are you contributing to it, or are you working against it? If you're working against it, and that simply means that your experience of it is different, it's painful. If you're working with it and contributing to it, it means your experience of it is wonderful. So here, look at it this way. You said, do you think that this will be a new era after the lockdown is over? Well, lockdown is a prison term. It's something that penitentiaries do when inmates get out of control and destructive. So I can see why our health authorities are using the term lockdown, because some people are getting so frightened that they're not really concerning themselves with other people, and they have to be confined so they won't spread the disease, the coronavirus, so that hospitals will have the capacity to help those that actually do get the virus. And all of that makes sense, doesn't it? So the question is, what is the intention for doing this? Is it love or is it fear? If it's fear, you're in lockdown. But what is it if you're in love? When you're with your family or in your apartment or in your condo or on your boat or wherever it is you're sheltering in place, that's a beautiful term. You can shelter any place. But what kind of shelter are you looking for? Just a roof, or are you looking for your heart? Well, ask yourself, am I going to join a lockdown, or am I going to join a love-in? If you're isolating yourself because you want to protect the people around you, because you want to protect your neighbors, because you want to protect the people that you run into at the grocery store, because you love life, or you're beginning to as you're experiencing this virus, then instead of locking yourself down, put yourself in a love-in. Now, here's the thing, it's the same action. It's the same thing in terms of physical action, but the difference is in intention. One is fear, one is love. And that difference of intention makes all the difference.
Yes, and every moment you have the choice to change that. If you find yourself in fear, you can change that to
Yes.
love. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but if you really want that, you can do that. Everyone can do that.
And Linda's correct. The choice comes moment by moment.
Every moment.
And so there is a power in the thought, choose love. Everybody, I think, that we know would like to do that. But creating authentic power gives you some concrete steps to do it. Developing emotional awareness. And you can read the book, The Heart of the Soul, that Linda and I co-authored. Making responsible choices. And you can read the book about authentic power and souls and our new evolution in the book that I wrote called The Seat of the Soul. But as you begin to put them into practice in your life, then you begin to sense the difference. Then you begin to use the new consciousness. And as you use the new consciousness, you begin to look at everything that occurs, every experience that's offered to you as an opportunity to grow spiritually. Your frightened parts are not your obstacles to spiritual growth. They're your avenues. And the things that happen, even as traumatic and global as the coronavirus, are your opportunities to grow spiritually, to lock yourself down or to love yourself, sheltering in place.
And everyone.
So I suggest that all of you who are participating in the lockdown, consider transforming it into a love-in.
Absolutely.
And then share your experiences of the love-in with others who were in love-ins.
Absolutely.
And maybe even with some who are locked down to tell them, there's another way of looking at what you're doing.
That's right. There's a different way. And I want to say, Shannon, I want to say that I really love seeing everyone that's been participating with us. I've seen many, many, many people that we know, that we really love and have been in our programs in the past. And it's just beautiful. And I also see how they're really supporting others who may not understand exactly what we're talking about. It's just so beautiful to see. So I just want to thank all of you. It's so wonderful to be with all of you. And Shannon, it's been just a joy to be with you and to meet you and be part of this.
You as well. Thank you so much for joining us. And the mindset shift of the energy behind the actions that we're taking and even how we're communicating about what's happening. I know in my home, we've started calling it a coronacation instead of a quarantine lockdown. Because why not just take that positive energy behind it?
Yeah.
We're still doing the same actions, but it's the intention that has the...
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I can't get a haircut now because so many non-essential businesses are closed. So you can say, this is my Corona cut.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So, I know we've been addressing kind of the questions as they've come in. So, thank you all for participating. And thank you, Gary and Linda. This was really spectacular. What a gift.
You're welcome,
What a
Shannon.
joy.
And thank you to the Mentor Channel for pulling this together and you for speaking with us.
So
Thank
beautiful. Bye-bye.
And we'll be posting this live. You guys can continue to post comments or questions. We'll go back through and address them. So thank you all. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.